Jonesy and Amanda.
Jam Nation.
In 1982, Lynette Dawson vanished from her Northern Beaches home, leaving behind her 2 daughters and a mystery that would go on for decades. It took a podcast called The Teacher's Pet to spark a global interest in this case, which then led to her husband's conviction of murder. Well, now the creator and award-winning journalist of the podcast, Hedley Thomas, has released a book which takes us behind the scenes of one of the most intriguing and enduring murder mysteries of our time. Hedley, hi.
Hi, Amanda.
It's quite the book, though.
Oh, quite a
the
story.
subject.
I know. And is it fair to say if you hadn't created the podcast, Chris Dawson would be walking free today?
Look, it's one of those really big questions. I think Lynn's family certainly are certain of that. If you talk to police, they'd probably say, well, I reckon we would have got him anyway. I don't want to attempt to claim credit for it. I just know that we shone a very bright light on this case. We made a powerful difference, and it left the DPP with, I think, an opportunity to go forward, and they did eventually after many knockbacks by that same DPP.
You started this podcast in 2018. How did you come across this case? It would have been a cold case by then. How did you find out about it?
I found out about it in 2001 when I was a features writer, and I was in Brisbane. I wanted to understand more about it because in 2001 it was an inquest, the first inquest that was being held into her presumed death. And it was just so compelling. It gripped me. I went to Sydney in 2001, wrote about it then. And back then I thought I should do a book on this. But life got in the way. I got busy. My wife had another child, and we were just so frantic with everything else, and the book went on hold. But then we get to late 2017, and everybody had started listening to podcasts, talking about podcasts, and I realised the story that I wanted to unpack much more fully years earlier I could do as a podcast investigation.
And it's a double-edged sword as well, because legally there's so many how Chris Dawson could have got away with it because it was out there in the public forum.
Yeah, and we had to take enormous risks with the podcast, and we were effectively calling Chris Dawson out as a murderer who'd got away with a wife killing, and that took a lot of behind-the-scenes consultations, and our lawyers were a bit nervous, and editors too. But the book tries to unpack a lot of that detail, how we take on a major investigation like this and really push it to the limits.
So many people have listened to the podcast. What will we get from the book that we don't know already?
As Trent Dalton, my friend, the amazing author, said, if you think you know the story, think again. He's read it and he was blown away. It's a memoir of journalism, but it's also a very deep dive into all the things that I couldn't talk about during the podcast. There's so many interviews that I did, people I spoke to, information that I came across, that because of the pace that the podcast was going at, I didn't get a chance to properly reflect. And I also wanted to deal with some personal motives that I had for telling the story. And I'd never disclosed these before, and I wanted to do it in a thoughtful way, in a book, in a sensitive way, years later. So there's a lot of, I guess, vulnerability in there as well. But for people who appreciate journalism and appreciate how journalism can change things and affect the criminal justice system in a positive way, there's a lot to read.
One of your chapter titles has got some fruity language in it. What's that one about?
Oh, that's the one that says, Hedley, you're an effing wanker.
From your wife?
That comes from a quote from one of the Dawson brothers during a police telephone intercept. The telephone was being tapped during the podcast's rollout, and when the transcripts were released during the murder trial last year, the conversation between Chris and Paul became particularly colourful and angry when they were describing what they were hearing in my podcast, and I'd done a number of other interviews, television interviews and so on, where I had said that Chris Dawson should be prosecuted, that he almost certainly got away with murder, and of course they then were venting, and look, I don't blame them for being angry with me. I made their lives hell.
Well, yeah, they're not going to write a review for your book, I guess. Not a good one.
No, I wonder if Chris could get it though in Long Bay.
Yes.
That'd make some nice light reading.
Wouldn't it just?
Yeah. Well, Hedley, it's great to talk to you. You can purchase The Teacher's Pet from all good
It
bookstores.
sounds extraordinary.
Hedley Thomas, thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.